Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cinema Mancuso, and this is Notes on the News. I'm Peter Mancuso, and this is the show where I break down the biggest stories in film, media, entertainment, and give you my thoughts. If you joined us live, super happy to have you. If at any point you have any questions or comments about any of the topics I'm going to be covering, feel free to drop them in the live chat. I have it pulled up. I'll try to do my best to kind of keep an eye on it, see if we can kind of get a conversation started, because that's always really fun, right? If you haven't already, please like this live stream. It really, really helps with engagement and the algorithm, people finding the channel. So if you have found the channel, why not subscribe? We're trying to grow this community as best we can. If you're watching this after the fact, still super happy to have you. By the time you're watching this, there should be time codes in the description, so you can kind of jump around at your leisure. We stream this show every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, and same spiel as before. If you haven't already, please like this video, and do not forget to subscribe. Okay, let's take a look at the box office from this past week. Total domestic box office was just a little under 200 million, which was a 12% drop from where it was last week, which makes sense considering a Minecraft movie opened last week to very successful domestic numbers, and none of the new movies this week are really come close, right? But the fact that the drop isn't bigger is also a testament to a Minecraft movie. So why don't I just start there, because this week it brought in 116 million, so it's only like a 29% drop, right? So holding out pretty strong considering it's only into its second week. And now worldwide it's made $550 something million off of just a $150 million budget. So this is already well beyond the point of profitable. I think it's like the biggest opening for a video game movie ever. Which is again weird. Like, people are like, "Oh, video game movies we finally cracked the code." We've perhaps cracked the financial code. Most of these are still not very good. Like, I actually liked the Super Mario movie more than others did. I thought it was good. I didn't think it was great, though. And that was probably the best one that I've seen. I have not seen Five Nights at Freddy. I have not seen a Minecraft movie. But from my understanding, both of those movies are not particularly good. But also, like, Five Nights at Freddy's, which I feel like is like the most useful comp here, despite them being vastly different genres. This is not getting very good reviews from critics, but audiences seem to like it. Or at least fans of the property really like it. Like, it's kind of become a thing on social media of people filming their screening experiences, and it's just being Minecraft fans just like going crazy, throwing their snack. Kind of being like disrespectful, honestly. But if a character just says something that is like a reference to something, they're like, yo, and they throw their popcorn and everything, right? But financially, it's doing very well. But let's look at the new stuff, because half of this top 10 here is all new stuff, which is cool to say. Number 2, in its first week, of course, we have The King of Kings. This is an animated biblical retelling. Kind of, I guess it's based on a adaptation of the Gospels by Charles Dickens. So it kind of uses the Charles Dickens as like a framing device for this. Again, it wasn't expected to have a huge opening, and it's not that it did have a huge opening, but it exceeded the expectations. It was only projected to make around 8 to 15 million. It surpassed that, bringing us to a little over 19 million. So it's interesting that this was not the one I thought was going to be the biggest new movie. Though I believe it's mostly just playing domestically. There's like a little bit, I think something like not even $100,000, like even less, like maybe like $80,000 internationally. But this was really cheap to make. It only cost about $5 million, so it is already doubled the budget. It is already profitable. And I've heard it's okay. Again, you can see from the critical scores here. Critics liked it fine enough. Audiences seem to really like it, but again, like I've talked about with The Chosen, which we'll talk about, there's a little bit of self-selection, right? Like, the people going to see a movie like this, since it's smaller, it's going to be people who are more likely to enjoy it, right? And speaking of The Chosen, we also have The Chosen Last Supper Part 3. Of course, they've basically just been releasing clusters of episodes from this newest season in theaters. I think it's like through Fathom events, which is great. I've always said that we should have more television events in theaters. Again, similar thing like The King of Kings. It has a very high popcorn meter score, but again, it's a little bit of self-selection. This fell within the projections. It made a little over $6 million. It fell between those $5 to $9 million projections, though I had put a target on 8. So it fell a little bit short, but hit the mark, so to speak. And also, like The King of Kings, whereas The King of Kings was almost exclusively a domestic release, this is just a full domestic release. So we don't have any numbers for how this would play elsewhere. And that's something I don't know about. Is The Chosen popular in other countries, or is that just an American phenomenon, if you can call it a phenomenon? Also opening this week, we have The Amateur. This is a, action thriller with Rami Malek. Again, critics kind of were a little touch and go about it, but audiences seem to like it, because it really does feel just like a movie that you would just find flipping through channels 20 years ago, like on cable or something, right? This also fell within the projections, but it exceeded my target, right? So I projected it to make around 10 to 16 million. The target around 13. This made almost 15. So again, kind of defying expectations a little bit, right? Worldwide, it's made a little over 32 million, but it cost $60 million to make. So we are still very much in a negative return. It's still a negative return film. But again, a film like this, I think they're going to try to make their money back in the ancillary markets. I doubt they're going to really try hard to make this like a big blockbuster success story. Another film opening this week, Warfare. This is Alex Garland's next film after his film from last year, the Civil War, which is one of my favorite movies of the year. Critics seem to really like it. Audiences also seem to really like it. Also fell within the projections, but fell short of the target. So around 6 to 18 is where it was, the kind of those brackets. I had put it around 11, just because most of the projections were kind of closer to that 18 mark. So at least it didn't fall below 6, right? That's the best we could hope for in this situation. Also, a solely domestic release, following. I think it's based off of a true story about these soldiers in Iraq. Which I'm hesitant about, because like, how many movies have we had where it's like, oh, war is bad, but like it's bad because of how it affected the white invaders, right? Like, there's so many movies like this. But again, I like Alex Garland, so I'm hoping to see it at some point. I've just been like really, really busy. But like The Amateur, it is nowhere near making back, even just on a first level, making back its budget. It costs about $20 million to make. So again, it still has a long way to go. And I feel like there hasn't really been much marketing push for this. We also have Drop. This is like another horror thriller film, opened at 5th place. Again, critics and audiences seem to like it well enough, though this actually did fall below projections. I projected it to make around 8 to 15 million. It only made a little over 7, so it just barely fell out of that range. Which again, the thing about the projections is weird, right? Because it, if you exceed, like something like King of Kings, you exceeded projections, right? That's all great. But really what makes this film successful is the fact that it only cost $5 million to make. And it's basically, nearly 300% return in its first week. So the projections are somewhat misleading, but they do give a sense of the momentum of a film's opening. So if something, kind of falls below the projections or exceeds the projections, that kind of gives you a sense of the, like I said, the momentum of that film's release. Looking here, there's not too much to report on. Everything's kind of just has stayed where it is. I guess A Working Man is notable in that it dropped from 2nd to 7th place. All of those new movies kind of took up all that space. But now it's in its 3rd week. Again, critics didn't really like it. Audiences like it pretty well. Again, it feels like a very cable-y movie. Its worldwide total now is up to a little under 64 million. So it's crossed that initial threshold of the budget, but ideally you want to see it double the budget to account for all the marketing and advertising costs. Snow White, of course, still here, dropped from 3rd to 8th place, now in its 4th week. Again, critics did not really like this film. Audiences like it fine, but again, people don't want to think the $20 in 2 hours they just spent was in vain, so people usually are more forgiving when reviewing like a movie that they just saw. So the fact it's at 72 really speaks to audiences not particularly liking it all that much. Worldwide, it's made over $182 million, but again, it costs so much money that it's going to be very unlikely that this film is going to even get to like 250 to at least get that initial budgetary breaking even, quote unquote. And then also The Woman in the Yard, it's, again, similar situation, was higher up in the top 10, but dropped precipitously down from 4th to 10th place. Audiences did not like this. Critics do not like this at a 50% drop. But, it looks like I forgot to put in the data for the worldwide total. But as you can imagine, it's not super gangbusters. That's so embarrassing. Stupid. I should have double checked and made sure I filled in all the data. And then looking ahead to this week, we have Ryan Coogler's latest film, Sinners. This is projected to make around 30 to 45 million. I'm going to put the target basically like right in the middle, around 37 million. I've heard really good things about this. And it was designed for IMAX in mind, I think. I think Ryan Coogler did a video about shooting on 70 millimeter and then using IMAX 70 millimeter. So, I hope audiences like this and go to this, but again, it's not a big name. It's not a big, like Ryan Coogler, I don't think is a household name. And Michael B. Jordan, I feel like just his career has kind of stagnated. So I'm not sure if he's as big of a draw as he maybe would have been 10 or even 5 years ago. Oh, wait, hold on. Oh, I just gave you a little spoiler because I actually have a plug I want to do before going on. I have another YouTube channel I recently started called Replay Rewind. 1,000 video games across 50 years of gaming history. Can I play them all before I die? Well, we're going to find out. It's my attempt to go through all of this, experiencing most of these games for the first time. It's already been a lot of fun. I think the last game I did was Galaxian, which so far is my favorite that I've done. So definitely go check that out. I have my gameplay videos as well as like a history review and breakdown, wrap up afterwards. You can find the link to that in the description down below. Okay, now we're ready for story one. Let me grab a quick drink. That was more than a quick drink. I'm really thirsty today. Okay, so let's talk about story number one. So China is going to be reducing the number of Hollywood films that it imports. This, of course, is in response to the Trump tariffs, which we'll talk about in more detail in a bit. And China is looking to increase its import of films from other countries and decrease the amount from the United States. And I have a quote here from the China Film Administration, or the CFA, which essentially is their government-run film bureau, if you will. Because, of course, it's a communist totalitarian country. And the CFA put out a statement saying, quote, in response to a recent reporter's question about whether the additional tariffs imposed by the United States on China will affect the import of American films, a spokesperson for the National Film Administration said that the wrong move by the U.S. government to abuse tariffs on China will inevitably further reduce the domestic audience's favorability towards American films. We will follow market rules, respect the audience's choice, and moderately reduce the number of American films imported. China is the world's second largest film market. We have always adhered to a high level of opening up to the outside world, and will introduce more excellent films from the world to meet market demand, end quote. So they're really emphasizing here that this is not a move by the government to limit outside influence, but rather a very targeted consequence for the United States specifically. And the reason why this is important, right, is, and as the statement says, that China is the world's second largest film market, right? And it's been really, really important for American films and American film studios, right? The role of the Chinese box office. So this really started I mean, I'm not going to do like a whole history on modern Chinese history because I'm not qualified to talk about it, nor do I even really know all that much enough to really talk to you about it. But you start to see, you know, in the maybe 1970s onward, you see an attempt by the Chinese government to open up to the world, kind of take on more, democratic's the wrong word, but try to be more like other Western nations, particularly economically. And this is just as true for the film industry. So this really starts in the 1990s. This strategy of releasing your films in China. But this really takes hold in the 21st century, right? And this is related to like the dawn of the mega blockbuster. Because of course blockbusters have existed in Hollywood forever. Especially with something like Star Wars and Jaws and kind of like the birth of like the change of Hollywood from like the new Hollywood of like the auteur avant-garde people into more mass appeal films. But those films had a ceiling, right? You really start to see in the 2000s, and then especially the 2010s, this mega blockbuster, these tentpole films. And you might argue is this might be kind of a chicken or the egg scenario, right? You know, did the mega blockbuster develop because of this new huge market that wanted their films? Who's to say? And this was not only viable, but you know, this was a very strategic distribution approach. Despite all the restrictions, it was still worth it, right? So, you know, in the United States, and this is a blanket statement, but, you know, if I'm Warner Brothers, typically if I release a film in theaters, I'm going to get about 50% of the ticket sales, and then the theater is going to get the other 50%. When they release films in China, the American film studios only get about 25%. So it's like half. But it's worth it, like I said, because it's such a huge market. You know, for context, this isn't for an American film, but you'll often see if you look up like the highest grossing films worldwide for different years, you'll often see films you've never heard of. They're like Chinese only films that like did not release, at least they didn't release in the United States or didn't have like a wide release in the United States. And these films often rank highly. So these Chinese only films are able to rank highly on worldwide box office lists just from Chinese audiences, right? That's how much money there is to be made. And that's why it's worth it, or at least the studios felt it was worth it, to take the concession of only getting 25%, because it's still 25% of this huge number. And again, not only does it add to the revenue, sometimes it can really save a film, right? So some films perform poorly here domestically, but then they're saved by the Chinese box office. That like they end up making a shit ton of money, and that leads to it getting a sequel or something, right? And the most recent agreement, this isn't just like the floodgates aren't just open, right? Because of course China, I hesitate to call it a communist country, because any good communist knows that communism has never really been implemented in history. So I'm going to use phrases like totalitarian. Because in authoritarian, because it is certainly that. Because it's still a totalitarian and authoritarian state. You know, they're still very judicious about foreign imports, especially with something like film, because it's a cultural import, right? The most recent agreement that China had was to allow 34 foreign films per year. And again, this is mostly a one-way relationship. We put a lot of our movies in their theaters, but rarely do their films even, you know, perform well here in the United States, if they even play here at all, right? I think the exception that kind of proves the rule, that more recent film, Ni Jia 2, this animated film, not only did it play here, but made it into the top 10, and I believe has actually surpassed Inside Out 2 to be the highest grossing animated film of all time. Again, for a film that's mostly just playing in China, right? And again, the you know, we're sending our stuff over, but China, again, still has a strong film industry of their own. And Reuters notes that Hollywood films only make up about 5% of the Chinese box office, right? So it is a strange asymmetric relationship on multiple levels, right? But of course, the relationship between China and the rest of the world, but particularly the United States, is frayed, right? And we really see that start with the Donald Trump's political ascension, right? He, on the campaign trail and then his first administration, really used China as this very useful scapegoat to channel frustration, valid frustration, with stagnant economic conditions for American workers. This idea of all the jobs went to China. And that's not totally untrue, right? But China almost, it became like a running joke, like China, right? Like Donald Trump talking about China, right? But for the Democratic Party, which abhors Donald Trump, I would argue rightfully so, they've adopted this very hostile posture against China. And it feels like a new Cold War is brewing between us and the People's Republic of China. And this is a bipartisan Cold War, is my point, that, establishment politicians on both sides of the aisle, are kind of fueling this cultural divide. And of course, this all comes to head with the tariffs that the American markets have been reeling from over the past week or two. And these tariffs, of course, levied against almost every country, but there were particularly high rates for China. And then more recently, Trump has kind of receded or reduced some of these tariffs, but he actually increased the tariffs on China up to 125%. In response, China responded with 84% tariffs of its own. So, all of this to say, I think this is just expediting the inevitable. I don't think, the relationship between the American film industry and the Chinese government was this beautiful, perfect thing, and then just last week it all fell apart. This had been brewing for a while, right? American films have been performing worse in China as the geopolitical tensions rise. And Reuters notes that fact makes China's actions here not as damaging as they maybe would have been 10 or even 5 years ago for the American films. It's still damaging, but it's not like it's been turned off overnight. The returns have been getting worse and worse, right? And the LA Times notes that the 2024 Hollywood box office in China was already about 75% below the 2017 peak. So we'd already been on this downward trend. So this is really a test of strength or show of strength for Beijing, right? I got a quote here from Chris Fenton, who is the author of a book all about this called Feeding the Dragon: Inside the $1 Trillion Dilemma Facing Hollywood, the NBA, and American Business. And Chris Fenton says, quote, "Such a high-profile punishment of Hollywood is an all-win motion of strength by Beijing that will surely be noticed by Washington," end quote. And I have another quote here from Omdia analyst David Hancock saying, quote, "Given that the Asia-Pacific region accounted for nearly 40% of global box office revenue in 2024, this poses serious concerns for studios relying on global success. Animosity toward the U.S. following the implementation of Trump tariffs may further weaken Hollywood's presence in these regions," end quote. So, again, this is just speeding up a process that was already kind of taking place, which all of this is really unfortunate because, I remember this moment during, in the lead up to the TikTok ban in January, which ended up being reversed in less than 24 hours. People started using, what was that other app, Red Note? And for the first time, average Americans and average Chinese were able to kind of have a cultural exchange. And it was some really interesting stuff and kind of this shared sense of humanity and because most of the time, geopolitical tensions really don't matter to people. They might think it matters to them, but, the average Chinese person, the average American person could be friends if there wasn't this wall of language and culture and geopolitics in the way, right? So it's unfortunate because maybe exchanging more films and making that exchange more proportional. So not only are we sending our films there, but we're getting some of their films. That exchange might help ease some of these tensions, right? But it's gonna just become this self-fulfilling prophecy, and this will change theoretically, hopefully, but not anytime soon. I think the we're really getting to a point of no return in terms of peaceful coexistence. Doesn't mean we're going to necessarily go to war with China. Knock on wood. Let's hope not. But I think the era of the close economic ties is we're slowly but surely starting to move away from that. And I'm not sure when, if at all, we'll be able to return to that kind of relationship. Okay, before going on, I just want to give another quick plug to the podcast I do with my fiance Viviana, called That's What I Call a Franchise, where we pick a film franchise and we go through every single installment, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We just recently wrapped up our franchise on Middle-earth, Lord of the Rings, and all that good stuff. It was a lot of fun to dig into all of that. Our next season, which is going to be starting, I think, the first Friday of May, is going to be about the Muppets, which is really exciting. I'm already having a lot of fun watching the first couple that we've started. So definitely go check that out. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also just find us on YouTube if that's your preferred way to podcast, or you can just go to the link in the description down below. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Okay. God, I'm thirsty today. Okay. I'm like spilling water on me because I'm trying to drink it so much. Okay. Let's talk about story number 2. So the original 1977 theatrical cut of Star Wars is set to screen this summer at the British Film Institute, or the BFI. The BFI's Film on Film Festival in London. They have been granted permission to do this by Disney and Lucasfilm. And there's currently no plans to screen the other 2 films in the trilogy, like Empire Strikes Back or Return of the Jedi. IndieWire notes that attendees of the festival will also be able to view materials from the continuity script. So that's like the script on set. So these materials include things like rare on-set Polaroids, pictures from the production, annotations of the script, as well as deleted scenes, which is really cool. James Bell, who's the senior curator of fiction at the BFI National Archive, said, quote, "One of the ambitions of the BFI Film on Film Festival is to screen original release prints that transport audiences back to the moment a film was first released, to give audiences of today the special emotional connection that comes when viewing the very same object seen by a film's original audience. In the case of Star Wars, the festival screening is a unique opportunity to present the film to audiences in exactly the same form as they would have watched it in 1977, end quote. So the reason why this is important, or exciting, or interesting, is because any good Star Wars fan knows that the theatrical cut of the original 1977 film has been essentially under wraps for decades. And this goes back to George Lucas himself, the creator of Star Wars. So, he, despite those films being cultural phenomenons and making boku bucks and completely changing culture and the film industry, he was deeply unsatisfied with those original films, particularly as it came to the execution of like the visual effects, right? But come the 90s, now that you have CGI technology, he decides he wants like another little crack at it. So he creates what are colloquially known, I guess also officially known, as the special editions. This is like in the late 90s, I think it was like 1997. And these were re-releases of the original films back in theaters to create hype for the soon-to-be released prequels, starting with The Phantom Menace in 1999. But it wasn't just a straight re-release, it had enhancements, you might charitably say. And a lot of these enhancements were a little controversial, right? So inserting dated 90s CGI into the film in different places, sometimes changing lines, or weird sound effects, like of the way a creature sounds, adding scenes in some cases. Of course, the most controversial was in the original cut, Han shoots Greedo, but in this version, Greedo shoots first, so then Han he's well, because George Lucas was like, well, Han Solo's a hero. It's not very heroic to shoot someone first. Which, George, you misunderstand the character you've created. That's how he starts as a bad dude, and then he becomes a good guy. So that's where you get like the phrase Han shot first, like this defiant, like, no, we refuse to accept these changes as canon. And you know, again, this was very controversial, and I'm hard pressed to find anyone who says, oh yeah, I prefer the special editions to the original theatrical cuts. You might have some people who don't mind it, or you know, like it fine enough, but I don't think anyone prefers it if they had to choose. But, you know, George Lucas is very stubborn. And because he, you know, Lucasfilm, until it was bought out by Disney, since it was an independent company and he was like the head of it, he could really do whatever he wanted. I have a quote here from him responding to Backlash in 2004 saying, quote, sorry you saw half a completed film and fell in love with it, but I want it to be the way I want it to be, end quote. So he's basically like, doesn't matter if you like the original version, you didn't see the finished version. This is the real version. And it didn't stop there, because Lucas just kept tinkering with every new re-release. So there were changes for the 2004 DVD release, there were changes for the 2011 Blu-ray release, and, you know, all of this is annoying. And I mentioned before, I don't think anyone would prefer the special edition versions if they could choose. But that's important that I say that, because they can't choose. The last time the theatrical cut of the original trilogy, those first three films, the last time those three films were the theatrical cuts were commercially available or released was 2006, and they were only bonus discs on a reissue of the special edition DVDs. And not only that, it's not even DVD quality. It's a basically ripping the Laserdisc version from the early 1990s. If you don't know what Laserdisc is, a Laserdisc is basically like a predecessor to DVDs. It was basically vinyl. It was the size of like a vinyl record. So because it's at a lower resolution, but they don't blow it up so it's more pixelated, so they keep it at the lower resolution. So essentially there's black bars around the entire image. Which is, so it's smaller, it's low res, it almost feels like a fuck you for George Lucas, as like, if you want to see this is like one of the worst ways to watch this movie. It almost feels like it's like acting as a deterrent to make you just go, I'll just go watch the special edition because it's higher quality. Especially now, because now you can watch the special editions in 4K. Whereas, you know, the theatrical cut is still locked to essentially a Laserdisc rip on a DVD. And, you know, Lucas considers his newer versions the only ones worth preserving. And he claims, the George Lucas isn't always reliable, so take this claim with a grain of salt. He claims the original negatives for the original trilogy were destroyed during the special edition process, which either he's lying or that's like the most gross mismanagement of film history ever. Because that's the thing, is that this is like the movie that changed films and arguably pop culture more than anything. So you would think it would be of historical significance to preserve this film as it was, right? There have been fan efforts that have been mounted to bring the theatrical cuts into the HD era. These are unofficial, technically illegal, you know, but they do exist, right? This is what's called the despecialized edition. And the way they basically did this was, they took unaltered portions of the film from like existing HD or 4K releases, used anything they could get from any surviving prints from like movie theaters, which I think this is where this print is coming from for BFI's film festival, as well as potentially artificial intelligence. I think I'm not saying like ChatGPT, like, because I've heard about the despecialized editions like a decade ago, So, all these kind of processes, but it would be really great if it was just officially available. But I always knew this was inevitable, right? Lucas's stubbornness is the only reason why the theatrical cut has been withheld for so long. But he's not involved anymore. Disney has bought Lucasfilm over a decade ago. And they don't give a shit about, which version is the one worth preserving. They just want money, right? And this is the version fans want. So this is a huge moneymaker, just lying in wait. I always figured they would wait until George Lucas was like dead or something, but I guess, this might be testing the waters. Since it's not technically an official release, it's just a screening, right? But all in all, this is major for film preservation. The fact that there is an acceptable and presentable surviving print of the original theatrical cut is really exciting, right? And again, I'm not against director's cuts. And in some cases, director cuts can be even better than the theatrical version. But the original should always be accessible. Every version of a film release should be accessible in some form. Again, for no other reason, for historical purposes. And this is true for all media, for movies, for music, books, games, whatever it is. It's really important that we're able to preserve this history. Even if we decide, we don't actually care about it, we don't know what our posterity will care about. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Okay. Let's talk about story number 3. So the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences will finally be recognizing stunt work with a new awards category at the Oscars. It's going to be called the Academy Award for Achievement in Stunt Design. This is going to start in 2028 at the 100th Academy Awards, which is kind of cool. And of course, that's going to be celebrating the films from the year prior in 2027. I have a quote here from Academy CEO Bill Kramer and Academy President Janet Yang saying, quote, "Since the early days of cinema, stunt design has been an integral part of filmmaking. We are proud to honor the innovative work of these technical and creative artists, and we congratulate them for their commitment and dedication in reaching this momentous occasion," end quote. I also have another quote from David Leitch, who's the director of films like John Wick, Deadpool 2, and the more recent The Fall Guy, which I believe Ryan Gosling, who stars in it, basically said the whole film's reason for existence is essentially a campaign to get the Academy to create a stunt award category. David Leitch, this director, said, quote, "Stunts are essential to every genre of film and rooted deep in our industry's history. From the groundbreaking work of early pioneers like Buster Keaton, Harold Lloyd, and Charlie Chaplin, to the inspiring artistry of today's stunt designers, coordinators, performers, and choreographers. This has been a long journey for so many of us. Chris O'Hara and I," there's another guy kind of part of this effort, "Chris O'Hara and I have spent years working to bring this moment to life, standing on the shoulders of the stunt professionals who have fought tirelessly for recognition over the decades. We are incredibly grateful. Thank you, Academy," end quote. And the rules for eligibility and voting for this category won't be announced until 2027 as we get closer. So, as David Leitch kind of acknowledged, and the Academy acknowledged, this has been a long-running effort. Deadline notes that proponents or supporters of introducing this category have met with various Academy administrations over the years, but nothing has ever come of it. The Hollywood Reporter notes that currently now there are more than 100 stunt professionals in the Academy's production and technology branch. But again, this has been something I've been hearing about forever, and I'm sure it's been going on even before I started hearing about it. I got a quote here from Jason Statham all the way back in 2013 saying, quote, "I think it is an overlooked category, considering how much responsibility these coordinators have for some of the greatest entertainment and action movies. I mean, all of the stuntmen, these are the unsung heroes. They really are. Nobody's giving them any credibility. They're risking their necks. It's a total injustice. They're the ones getting busy," end quote. And that's really important that Jason Statham, who is like the star of these movies, is kind of using his platform to speak out, being like, look, people care about me, but most of the time I'm not even doing the stuff, right? All of this to say, I'm kind of ambivalent about this. I think it's great that it's being recognized. But, at the same time, I'm not sure if their work like their work shouldn't have to be validated by the Academy for it to matter, right? And sometimes sometimes like categories at the Academy are weird. Like I know the more recent new category that was announced, I think about a year ago, and it's not implemented yet, is like a casting category. And sometimes these categories, it feels like, what are we even awarding here? Because something like casting is so obfuscated through so many different parts of production that, you know, I guess you're awarding it to the casting director, but what if is the performance good because of the director or the actor? What if the casting director was just kind of a whatever involved, right? Not to diss casting directors, but just like on principle, it's like, how do you do that? And I guess stunt work is different in that, like, you have a stunt coordinator who's like doing all that, and it's a lot more clear, right? The only real problem with this, and I feel like I'm the only one who has thought of this, is could this be dangerous, right? You know, we've heard, you know, the Academy and David Leitch have mentioned how this has been integral to film history. But part of that film history is people getting really hurt, if not dying. And when I was at NYU, we literally took a course called Production Safety. It was only a half semester course. It wasn't even like a full semester. But we went through how to conduct yourself safely on set. But we looked at case examples of instances where safety rules were obviously ignored and then tragedy struck, right? People died. Part of me is like, now that there's like this incentive to, because winning awards is big money. You know, I mean, he's awful, but that's like what we learned from Harvey Weinstein, that you can make a lot of money getting an Academy Award. It's worth the money to do a big awards campaign, or in this case, maybe getting crazier and crazier with the stunts. Is that going to increase the likelihood of someone getting really hurt or, you know, God forbid, getting killed, right? Again, I'm the only person, at least I'm aware of that is suggesting this. So maybe I'm being hyperbolic. All in all, this is a great win for the stunt community to get that work recognized. But I don't think most viewers of the Academy really care. And that shouldn't matter. Because it should be about celebrating the achievements. But the Academy and ABC, who broadcast the show, that comes second. They care about what audiences care about. So maybe actually this will matter, because audiences won't care about the award itself, but they'll care because of film that they like. Because just by definition, the films that are going to get nominated are going to be films that might also have crossover with average moviegoers. Maybe this is actually a very shrewd business decision to get people who maybe wouldn't watch the Oscars or who are less likely to watch the Oscars to actually sit down and tune in. Okay, just want to give another plug to another YouTube channel I have called Peter Squared. This is a channel where I cover film topics related to film, media, entertainment, but in a more structured video essay format. The video I have up right now is called A Closer Look at Frozen, where, you guessed it, I take a closer look at the Disney film Frozen, taking a look at what went right, what went wrong, and everything in between, using these cartoon versions of myself. It was a lot of fun to make. Definitely go check it out and comment and let me know why you disagree with everything I say. You can find the link to that in the description down below. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Okay. Let's talk about story number 4. So HBO has officially announced its adult cast. We still don't know the children, but they've announced the adult cast for its Harry Potter reboot TV series. And some of these we already knew. But we're now getting official confirmation. So this cast is going to be including John Lithgow as Albus Dumbledore, Janet McTeer as Minerva McGonagall, Professor McGonagall. I didn't know her first name was Minerva. Papa Assidiu, pictured here to my left, as Severus Snape, as well as Nick Frost as Rubius Hagrid, which I'm not a big Harry Potter fan. I thought Hagrid was his first name. I didn't know that was his last name. I got a quote here from, or at least a joint statement, from Francesca Gardner, who's the showrunner and executive producer of the show, as well as Mark Millard, who's the director of several multiple episodes, as well as an additional executive producer. They put out a statement saying, quote, "We're delighted to have such extraordinary talent on board, and we can't wait to see them bring these beloved characters to new life," end quote. And like I said, they're still casting the child stars. We still don't have any insight on that, but, you know, even when they do, it's not like we're going to know them, right? They're going to be unknowns, theoretically. And, you know, this is all for this Harry Potter reboot series that's meant to serve as a quote-unquote faithful adaptation of the books. I guess the idea being that, you know, having the extended runtime of a TV show where essentially each book gets one season, you're able to, there's more room for material that maybe was cut out of the films, right? And I've talked about this with my other videos about this reboot series. My big question is, will this be any good, right? You know, this is clearly a strong cast, and, you know, it could get even stronger. You know, The Guardian notes there's rumors of Cillian Murphy being considered for Voldemort, which would be insane. And Harry Potter is good material. I think it was a little overhyped, and then there was kind of a backlash now in the recent years. I think the more level-headed, you know, take on Harry Potter is that it's pretty good, sometimes really, really good. So the pieces seem to be there. Though I've said this a million times, I wish that they took it into a different direction. Like making it animated or something. Because that would solve your problems of having the child stars, because you don't have to worry about aging them up as they get older or casting them for like a 7-year commitment, because maybe you could get adults to play the children, right? So I always thought that would be a better idea or more creative as a way to distinguish it from the films. But I guess the main distinguishing factor from the films is that expanded runtime. But even if this will be good, should they even be doing this? Because of course the fandom for the franchise has died down, right? You know, the Fantastic Beasts movies really fell on their face. Harry Potter and the Cursed Child is very successful on Broadway financially, and I think it's all over the world as well. But critically, it's not super. It didn't get super good reviews, and I from my understanding, the Harry Potter fan community is kind of mixed on it, right? So, you know, is this even worth it? On top of that, you know, by doing this, you are, as HBO and Warner Brothers, you are supporting J.K. Rowling, who of course has been very controversial since her books and the films based on those books wrapped up, for being very vocally transphobic, almost to the point of self-parody. And, you know, it doesn't matter if she's involved that much or not, though it actually does seem like she's fairly involved in making sure it's faithful to her source material. But even if she wasn't, she's getting royalties from it. So you're actively supporting this person who's saying really harmful stuff about the trans community. But in Hollywood, money is everything, right? So HBO, I have a quote from the HBO head, Casey Bloys, saying, quote, "I'm totally comfortable with it," referring to working with J.K. Rowling, "and I'm not worried about it. Look at the huge success of the Hogwarts video game last year. I'm not concerned about consumer response," end quote. So I guess they've done the calculus and decided we're going to make enough money that, you know, it's worth it to either piss off people or, you know, we have to swallow our conscience, if they even care, right? So, you know, this is exciting. I like all of those cast members, but, you know, I'm going to be more interested to see once we actually, you know, see stuff from this show. Okay, let me grab another quick drink here. Okay, let's talk about story number 5. So, live from London, it's Saturday night. Saturday Night Live is getting remade for the United Kingdom. I almost said the Animal Kingdom. The United Kingdom. This was actually, we were already aware of this like for a couple of years, but it's like officially gotten the green light. It's going to be on Sky, which is another Comcast-owned television channel in the United Kingdom. Comcast, of course, owns NBC. This is going to premiere next year in 2026. It's going to be executive produced by Lorne Michaels, who, of course, is the mastermind behind SNL all the way back to the beginning. And I got a quote here from Cecil Frott-Kotaus, who's the CEO of Sky Studios and the chief content officer for Sky, saying, quote, "For over 50 years, Saturday Night Live has held a unique position in TV and in our collective culture, reflecting and creating the global conversation, all under the masterful comedic guidance of Lorne Michaels. The Shore instead of Lorne. The show has discovered and nurtured countless comedy musical talents over the years, and we are thrilled to be partnering with Lorne and the SNL team to bring an all-British version of the show to UK audiences next year, all live from London on Saturday night." End quote. So this is an interesting development in the history of SNL. Of course, this show, it premiered the United States version, the American version, back in 1975 on NBC. It's a live sketch comedy show, which was novel then, but really novel now, considering we don't have many live sketch comedy shows except for SNL. And the whole gimmick is, they basically produce the show from beginning to end in 1 week. They'll have guest hosts and a guest musical star, and they basically work with them to prepare the show, and it's like this grueling production process. And it is ebbed and flowed in terms of its popularity and quality and relevancy, but it's always been a huge cultural touchstone, right? And the Hollywood Reporter notes that there have been several international versions already, but they are all short-lived. Some of them more successful than others, but none of them lasted more than like a couple seasons, including countries like Germany, France, Spain, Brazil, Japan, South Korea, Russia, Finland, Poland, Italy, Egypt, and China, which I was not aware of. And in fact, there actually has already been a Saturday Night Live, a British Saturday Night Live, called Saturday Live, but it was an unofficial adaptation. It had no connection or relationship to the American show. I think, I'm surprised that was like legally even allowed to, like in terms of copyright and trademark, they were even allowed to do that. But SNL is like this weird thing. It really is like a Rorschach test, because everyone feels like, oh, the SNL from when I was a teenager was the best era, and it's gotten worse since then. But that can't be true completely, because every generation has their period where they're teenagers. So it's just like always this like sliding, like the goalpost is always sliding, right? I'd argue though that it has really lost some relevancy in the modern digital era, because now, you don't need something like SNL to get a fix for like sketch comedy. There are other shows. There's pre-recorded sketch comedy shows, something like Key and Peele or Portlandia or what's Tim Robinson's show? I totally forget that. Eating the Burt. Can I have the Burt? I'm joking. Things like that, and also just YouTube, right? And especially TikTok, right? So SNL has done kind of okay in recent years in terms, because like they'll get some of their clips up on TikTok, but again, it doesn't really feel like the youth are tuning in to actually watch the show on television, either live or even just like DVRing it or catching it after the fact, right? So this decision to, 50 years now into the show's run, and Jacob in the comments, JJ, because thank you very much. I think you should leave. I knew it was, I think. I was going to say, I think I May Destroy You, but I May Destroy You is an HBO show that is a dramedy, or if not just a drama. So thank you very much, Jacob. But now that this show is basically 50 years into its run, is this decision to make a British version, is this a fantastic idea, or is this just like a major misfire? And like I said, the format of a live sketch comedy show, I feel like has really run its course and is really stale. I think the thing holding SNL back is that format. So despite them indicating that this British version will essentially be exactly the same in format, which is disappointing, could this down the road, could having a sister show breed innovation? Like, they could try stuff on this show. Like, they could take more chances with the format, since there's less legacy and there's less pressure to be a certain thing or be a certain way. That would be really cool. But as we know, companies just want to do what was successful before. They don't really want to take a risk, even though SNL itself was a risk depicted in the that film from earlier, late last year. It was in the fall, Saturday night, kind of depicting like that first broadcast. And that's always so frustrating, is that people just want to, people, quote unquote, companies just want to kind of stick with what has been successful. But everything that is successful was once a new gamble, right? So, it would be really cool to see if this British version really had its own identity that tried new things. But I'm kind of the mind, like, I was very surprised to see this headline, because I'm kind of the mind, like, okay, it's been on for 50 years. I think they should wrap it up. And it cancels the wrong word, but kind of sunset the program. All right, so that wraps up the show. Just want to give another quick plug to Cinema and Q. So it's not just a YouTube channel. It started as and still is a Substack newsletter where we publish new reviews for new movies coming out. Right now, we're really getting a lot of stuff from contributor and very good friend of mine, Jacob Boblet, doing reviews for new movies coming out while I'm taking a semi-hiatus because I'm really busy at the moment. Definitely would mean the world if you could go check that out. You can find the link to that in the description down below. You can also go to your browser, just type in cinemacuso.substack.com. Just want to say I got one more comment here in the comments. Viviana Metzger says, potentially unpopular opinion, but I have never thought SNL was funny. It depends on the sketch. It depends on the actors. It depends on the era, right? I don't know if I would say it's unfunny. That would be like saying, like, I don't know, like food is bad. Like, you can't say food is bad or food is good. Like, there's just food. And certain dishes or meals are good or bad, right? And you can kind of go from there. But again, that wraps up the show. Thank you all so much for watching. If you haven't already, please like this video. It really, really helps with engagement and the algorithm and people finding the channel. So if you haven't found the channel, why not subscribe? I'm trying to grow this as best we can. I'm doing this for a little over a year. We're only at around 350 subscribers, so I can't monetize this. All this time and effort, I can't even get like 4 pennies for your views. So it would really mean the world to me if you subscribe and send this to every single person you know. Until next time, peace out.